Welcome back to Tom's World Scale Models series. In this episode, we tackle the building phase of our Takom Jagdtiger tank hunter. If you enjoy programming on scale modeling, then show your support by subscribing to this channel. Leave us a comment, like, dislike, or share the video with friends. Clicking the notification bell gives you alerts when we post new content, or visit the channel Tom's World for a friendly visit for a complete list of all our videos. Our unboxing revealed a beautifully detailed and cast kit consistent with the Takom Willys and Stuck 3 models that we built on the series. For the kit's price, the photo etch was a nice addition, and we were relieved to find Lincoln Lift tracks after our herring experience with the Jagdpanther. Takom kits are usually well engineered with clear instructions, and as a blitz kit, we were looking forward to a fun, relatively quick and hassle-free build. So stick with us as we transform a pile of plastic parts into a fine-scale rendition of World War II's heaviest tank hunting colossus. We've built several German World War II tank destroyers over the years here at Tom's World. The Jagdpanther, the Sturmgeschütz 3, and the Jagdpanzer 38 kits were on the whole fun to build, and they turned out great. So we thought it apropos to continue down this family line and add the mother of them all to our collection, the mighty Jagdtiger. To begin the build, steps 1 to 3 have us install the swing arms, reservoirs, and the final drive liners, and here are the parts cleaned up and ready for installation. The swing arms are keyed, as are the chassis holes they get inserted into. A dry fit of one of the swing arms shows a tight fit with no play at all. The keys also ensure our swing arms point in the right direction. It also helps to get our axles lined up with each other, so the wheels we'll attach later will be aligned. There are 2 sets of swing arms, some with a longer axle, and we have to be careful to assemble them in the proper order. Here we see that the port swing arms point forwards, whereas the starboard side they point towards the rear of the vehicle. Step 3 calls for using the jigs that come in the box to get our axles aligned and pointing in the right direction. The jigs are a final check to ensure everything gets installed correctly. Here we're using the jig to check our work, and it was a relief to see that the swing arms matched the jig holes. Here we place the chassis on a flat surface, and when we press the opposite corners, we see there is no wobble. This tells us that our swing arms are properly installed and aligned. Steps 4 through 6 have us assemble the wheels. There are 16 wheel pairs for a total of 40 parts, including the 2 drive sprockets and idler wheels. There are also end caps, the final drive covers, and the idler wheel axle assembly. When removing parts from the sprue tree, I like to leave a little remnant rather than risking gouging the part with my sprue cutter. Then with a sanding stick, which is coarse on one side and fine on the other, we can gently remove the remnant. We follow the contour of our wheels so we don't create a flat spot. And here's how the piece should look after sanding. We repeat the process on all our parts, not just the wheels. To Takom's credit, the kit has many keyed parts, which makes assembling easier and ensures parts get properly aligned. And here are the wheel components all cleaned up and ready for painting. Turning our attention to the tracks, the kit builds them up using the length and link system. We get straight precast lengths of various sizes, as well as many 2-part loose pieces. Admittedly, as I was dressing the individual links, I was getting flashbacks of the harrowing experience with the Jagdpanther with its all individual links and separate guide horns. I guess I was suffering from a kind of indie track link PTSD. Still, with a little patience and perseverance, we get our tracks cleaned up and ready for assembly. The precast track lengths are a real time saver, and thank goodness, unlike the Mang Jagdpanther, the guide horns come precast onto the tracks. We need, give or take, 36 of the big single pieces and 42 of the little cone pieces to complete both track runs. We'll assemble these later once our road wheels are attached, painted, and weathered. Step 9 is the first time we come across the convention used to determine which parts to use for the variant we're building. We see the step number, then a dash, followed by the number of the variant. For example, if we're building the early version, we follow the 9.1 assembly. 9.2 is for the late version. Takom usually puts assemblies common to all variants in a box in the center. Since we're building the early version, we see here that we need to drill holes in the rear plate. The kit has a profusion of small and delicate parts. These tie downs for the towing clevises are indicative of the level of detail found in this kit. Note the wing nuts. However, to achieve this level of detail, we're provided with near microscopic pieces. These little nubs, for example, get attached to the sides of the armored muffler covers. There are very faint witness marks on the covers, which helps us to locate the nubs. Most model builders accept the presence of small parts, but the issue in this kit are the incessant mold parting burrs which plague pretty much every small part in this kit. This sledgehammer piece is easy enough to clean up, but the smaller parts are far more challenging and time consuming. One technique we can use to dress small parts is to attach the part first, then gently remove the burr with a fine sanding stick. We just have to make sure the joint is completely dry before we sand. This nasty knockout on the inside of this periscope brush guard needs dressing. We can use a square jeweler file to clean up the part. The rectangular periscopes have nasty knockout scars, but to our relief, these don't need dressing. For example, the periscope that gets installed in the commander's vision hatch. Note the slot and tab that helps us to properly install the part. Once the periscope is installed, the knockouts are hidden. Tubular components are often cast in two parts in styrene kits, and here we see how the mufflers are built up. It's important that our finished piece has no noticeable seam, and here's a technique to achieve this without having to use filler. As illustrated here on our Mang Jagdpanther build, we had a two-piece gun sleeve to assemble. We start by smearing a generous amount of thick model glue along the entire seam. We use more glue than usual, and we can spread the glue evenly using a toothpick. We then clamp the pieces tightly together. We let the assembly thoroughly dry for at least 2 hours. If we apply enough glue and pressure, there should be a bead of melted plastic that oozes out of the seam. This is exactly what we're looking for. We can then gently sand the seam following the contour of the part. We just have to make sure the bead is completely dry and hard. Here's how the gun sleeve looks after sanding. And here's our Jagdtiger muffler glued up using this technique. We see no seam and we didn't have to use any filler. Part fit in the kit up to now has been generally good. We see here that the rear plate slides snugly into the lower chassis. We have slight gaps, but these will disappear once we glue and press the parts together. There are slight gaps in the sponsons and rear plate, but presumably these will get covered once we attach the fenders. Depending on the variant we're building, step 12 also has us scrape off a few raised details. These are very minor witness marks that resemble little weld beads. To remove these, we can use a number 21 chisel blade. We gently scrape the raised detail to remove most of it. We finish with a few gentle swipes with a fine sanding stick. We don't want to polish the surface since we don't want to remove the Superstructure's rough cast metal-like finish, and here is the finished look. Since we're building the early variant, the instructions call for removing this little detail. I think the detail looks cool, so if it doesn't interfere with anything later in the build, we'll leave it on for now. Step 12 has us build up these tie downs around the hull hatches. We installed these at this point in the build according to the instructions. But we can see in these photos that the tie downs can get in the way of inserting the front face. It would have been better to install the front casement face first, then these little tie downs. Step 12 has us install these spare track hangers, and since we're building the early version, there are a total of 8 hangers per side. Takom molds these depressions into the superstructure sides to help us place these hangers. And here's how the hangers look once installed. They look a little wonky due to the camera lens parallax distortion, but obviously we want these little hangers to be installed straight. A dry fit of the spare track shows a perfect fit. Step 14 has us install the headlight and its power cable. Once assembled, the headlight looks great. The power wire for the headlight comes as a styrene part. It's fragile and we have to be careful when removing it from the sprue tree. Installing the wire is a challenge since there are no pins or holes to help us with attaching it to the glacis plate. Also, the wire simply butts up against the little nub on the connector and the nub on the headlight. There are no slots or holes to insert into. To install the wire, we use this Tamiya thin cement. It has a fine applicator brush. The glue dries fast and is thin, so it flows through capillary action. I first glue the connector and the headlamp in. Then I held the wire in place with masking tape. Next, I glued the ends of the wire to their connectors, while doing my best to press the parts together. I waited until the glue was completely dry, then I tacked the wire on with thin glue in these two spots. We don't want to get anywhere near our masking tape with the glue, as the tape wicks the glue up. This would make a mess of our glacis plate. Once these tacked areas are dry, we can then gently remove the tape and run our glue around the rest of the wire. And here's the finished look. Before we continue with our project, I thought I'd mention one builder's tip that's really helped me over the years. Rather than referring to the paper instructions that come with our kits, I like to check the ScaleMate's website to see if a digitized version is available. Once on the website, we search for our vehicle. Then on the vehicle page, we scroll down to the instructions heading and we can click the download tab. This brings up a PDF digital version of our instructions. These PDFs are handy since we can zoom in on the details. If you have a computer monitor on your workbench, having a PDF copy makes following the instructions much easier. Where a PDF isn't available, I'll usually scan the instructions and generate a digital PDF version that way. Steps 13 and 16 give us the option of replacing the towing cable mounting brackets with two separate pieces each, although the brackets are already molded onto the cables. It seems redundant, but I think some people like to cut the towing cable assembly apart so the swap poles can be drilled out. Then the poles and cables can be reassembled using the separate bracket pieces. The separate mounting brackets can also be used if we want to leave the cables off and depict empty mounting brackets like on this museum specimen. We'll skip this step and mount the towing cables in their original form. Jumping ahead a little, step 20 has us build up the rear casement wall and hatches. Once assembled, the inside of the hatches look great. And if we're careful with the assembly, the doors are functional. The kit comes with two MG42s, the top being the engine deck mounted one, and the bottom barrel stub gets mounted in the hull. Unfortunately, both are cast as solid pieces. The hull mounting MG stub also gives us another example of the incessant mold parting burrs found on practically every small piece in this kit. We want to drill a shallow hole in the MG barrels to make them look a little more realistic, and we'll need a good quality bit set. This one is sold by Axel, and it has bits ranging from a number 80 or 0.039 inches to a number 61 or 0.016 inches. We'll be using the smallest one, the number 61. It's not much thicker than a human hair. The bit is too small for our pin vise to snugly clamp it, so we have to make a shim by wrapping a little masking tape around the bit's base. We start by gently sanding the end of our MG barrel to remove any burrs. Then with a new number 11 hobby blade, we press it into the barrel dead center and gently rotate the blade. This gives us a shallow pilot hole. We then gently drill out the end of the MG barrel. The pilot hole keeps our bit from drifting as we apply pressure to it. Our hole doesn't need to be deep, but 1 millimeter will do. And here's the finished look. The kit provides us with a 3 piece split barrel. I don't much like split barrels, and I wasn't confident that the piece could be assembled without an excess of filling work. On Tom's World, we usually build on models using only parts found in the box, but in this build we broke with tradition and we purchased this aftermarket turned metal barrel. This one is made by Aber. The size matches the kit's barrel and it even has rifling on the inside. The Aber barrel wasn't specifically designed for this kit, so to mount the barrel all we have is this little stub to work with. We wanted our barrel to traverse and elevate like the original kit intended, so we kept the kit's mounting trunnion, but we removed the rest of the barrel at the little mounting tabs. Unfortunately, the Aber barrel stub, shown in red, was too short and too thin to fit snugly in the original barrel stem. I didn't have any styrene tubing of the right size, so I made this collar out of laminated styrene sheet, drilled to size and shaped roughly so it fit the gun mantlet and sleeve. Here the new barrel is dry fit to show the assembly. Speaking of the mantlet and gun sleeve, we get a tongue and groove to help us with alignment, but the absence of an alignment at the top of the part means they swivel. That means we have to be careful when we glue these two pieces together so they're perfectly aligned. And here's the completed mantlet and sleeve once glued up. The instructions call for assembling the gun tube first, then the gun barrel gets attached to the trunnion. Next, the trunnion and barrel get attached to the chassis. The top superstructure piece and chassis are then mated, and the front face and mantlet and sleeve are slipped over the gun. Because we're using an aftermarket barrel, this buildup won't work. Instead, we attach the front face of the superstructure onto the main superstructure piece. Here we used our 8-inch bar clamps to tightly grip the pieces together while our glue dried. Fillets of styrene round stock glued over the top seam ensures a strong joint. The front superstructure piece attaches to the sides using a mock dovetail joint to depict interlocking plates. The fit was poor as the front plate didn't easily fit into the corresponding slots in the sides. We'll look at this problem more closely in a moment. Next, the gun trunnion and our neutered gun tube were glued firmly to the chassis. As our dry fit here illustrates, later we'll attach our chassis and superstructure together and we should be able to slip our barrel, mantlet, and sleeve onto the jury rig collar and gun tube. Moving on to our photo etch parts, we'll be attaching this little grill to our engine deck panel, but we may as well get all our PE parts off the sprue and dressed. When we remove a PE part from its sprue with a sharp hobby knife, we leave a little of the sprue gate. Cutting a little away from the edge ensures we don't damage the part. We can use sharp scissors or a diamond file like this one to remove the sprue gate. A few swipes of our diamond file does the trick. Getting back to the front casement piece, out of the box the fit was not great. We had to remove a little material here and here just to get the piece to slip into its slots. The bottom and top of the front face fit well enough, but both sides revealed gaps. This totally spoils the look of interlocking plates that we're trying to achieve. We'll set this aside for now and we'll look at how to fill these gaps in the next episode. With our major subassemblies more or less done and the rest of our parts cleaned up, we're ready to move on to the final touches and painting. Some builders like to fully complete their models prior to painting. I find it easier to paint parts off the model prior to attaching them. And overall, it's easier to paint areas which become hard to reach if the model is fully complete. And that's a wrap for this episode. Check back soon for the next installment where we complete, paint, and weather our Takom Jagdtiger. If you haven't already, why not subscribe to the channel? Otherwise, leave us a like, dislike, share the video, or smack us down in the comments. Or mosey on down to the channel Tom's World for a friendly visit and for a complete list of all our entertaining and educational videos. In the meantime, keep your bench tidy and workspace well ventilated, stay well, and all the best.